All right, I think we're ready to get started. I would just like to give you a warm welcome to our West Plains Workforce Solutions Zoom event. Really like to thank you for taking the time to be here with us today. My name is Vicki Leifer. I'm the Assistant Superintendent at West Valley School District and former CTE Director. We really appreciate you again taking the time to join the meeting. Before we start, we want to go over a little bit of Zoom etiquette. As you entered the room today, you were muted, and just want to double check and make sure that you accidentally didn't unmute yourself as you came into the meeting. We'll have time for questions at the end, and we'll have you put your questions in the chat to ask questions. I'll read the questions and you can just put them in the chat as they come up. And finally, this call is going to be recorded, and we will hopefully have it uploaded for distribution tomorrow or early next week. At this time, we want to thank our sponsors for today, BNSF Railway and Eastern Washington University. BNSF has been a supportive member with the West Plains Chamber of Commerce for over 9 years, and it's always been a strong advocate in supporting our business community. Thank you, BNSF, for your sponsorship. I would like to now introduce Mark Baldwin with EWU to say a few words. Mark?
Yeah, thank you very much. I first of all wanted to just thank you all for letting me jump on this. This is not a role that I usually play, but I'm looking forward to talking about solutions. And this morning, as I was thinking about this, I was going to talk about workforce. I didn't realize we were actually going to go all the way to actually look at solutions. So I may be a little short on that. No, actually, Eastern's really looking forward to being engaged in with the West Plains to really find good partnerships. And what I've been saying to people is that universities can often approach people and communities and talk a lot about what we're going to do for you, and you're going to love it. And I think David May, as our new interim president, is really trying to say, let's find common ground and ways to use our resources to benefit the communities that are in our area. So this is a part of that today, is to participate here in this discussion and learn and to offer up our resources in a way that benefits everybody. So that's, I think, how I wanted to get started here this morning.
That's a great start. Thanks again, Mike, for helping make this possible, and thank you to BNSF. Workforce continues to be a growing concern across multiple sectors in the West Plains and in the surrounding areas, especially as our business community is responding to our state's guidance and regulations in terms of reopening. So we're thankful to have today's speakers with us and want to offer a warm welcome to Mike McBride, Business and Industry Analyst at Spokane Workforce Council. Hi, Mike. Wade Larson, Director of HR at Wagstaff Incorporated. Mark Baldwin, Chief of Staff at EWU. Adam Smith, CTE Director with Cheney School District. Tim Ames and Kim Headrick, Assistant Superintendent and Superintendent, actually backwards, Superintendent and Assistant Superintendent at Medical Lake School District. So please join me in welcoming our first speaker, Mike McBride, the data guy. Thanks, Mike.
Hey, thank you, Vicki, for the introduction. I wanted to share my screen real quick. I think someone else needs to unshare, unless that went up. That went up, I hope. Okay, cool. You. So I just wanted to kind of present a little bit of data to kind of level set where we are before this discussion. I think that might be useful. So I'll try and run through it really fast. So new numbers came out just yesterday for the March unemployment totals. So you can see the civilian labor force was 249,000 compared to March of last year, right before the pandemic occurred. We're actually down quite significantly, about 14,000 individuals out of the labor force compared to the same time last year. So that's a thing I'll come back to in just a minute. But employment levels, 233,000 unemployed, actually less than the same time last year, giving us an unemployment rate of the same as last year, interestingly. But that's definitely because the denominator of the labor force is down. So just across the state, You can see the more rural counties are staying a little bit higher than the more urban counties as the reopening starts to occur. But Spokane being at 6.3% is significantly down from April 2020, where we were at the all-time high of 16.7%. But here's what I wanted to kind of focus on, which kind of speaks to the discussion today, is our current labor force total. This is the past year, from March 2020 to March 2021. You can see there's a lot of noise in the month-to-month data, but just the overall general trend is kind of a downward line. We are expecting, as reopening comes back, and hopefully we continue on a trajectory of continued reopening, that the labor force will come back in some capacity. But you can see in the last couple months, it's only increased a little bit. And there's kind of three prongs that are causing the labor force decline. One was we did have a significant amount of retirements occur in the last year. We had a large number of our labor force at that retirement or near retirement age. And because this pandemic didn't cause necessarily a stock market crash like the prior recession, the 401ks of folks didn't get decimated, so it didn't cause a need to stay in the labor market. So we did see the expected amount of retirements continue. Still, with the pandemic still very much active, returning to work, just people being more or less afraid or unwilling to return to work, is still causing people to just exit the labor force. But really, most significantly, where we're seeing a significant amount of the labor force participation rate be affected is with female workers. And these are national numbers, but they can be applied locally pretty closely. But basically, every recession since 1948 has majority impacted male workers for the most part, but the most recent recession significantly impacted women in comparison to men. And that's because the jobs that were affected are more often filled by female workers. You can see the labor force participation rate on the right-hand side. Almost everyone dropped in that March, April, May timeline, right when things were really new and raging. And then everyone's labor force participation rate more or less came back to some extent. Then you can see in the fall, that August, September, October timeline, the mothers category was significantly down. And that obviously coincides with school returning to session and being in the virtual environment. So the fact that family and childcare is disproportionately applied to females still in the labor market, that is where we're seeing a significant effect. So as schools begin to reopen, and I'm sure we'll hear plenty about that from the school folks on the call today, we do expect that to return somewhat, but it really has put an acute focus on the need for childcare and those matters in our economy. I won't go too much into the continued claims, but just in terms of the unemployment claims, there's about 18,000 continued unemployment claims in Spokane County, but almost 8,000 of those are in the pandemic emergency unemployment compensation, which is an extension of how long you can be on unemployment. So we're seeing a significant amount of people who would be considered long-term unemployed. So that's more than 27 weeks on unemployment. And that's what it would require to become part of the PEUC program, which was part of the CARES Act. And then also the PUA is Pandemic Unemployment Assistance, which allows 1099 gig and part-time employees to go on unemployment. And that has stayed really around 6,000 for months on end. So we're seeing regular continued claims come down, but we're seeing the long-term unemployed category continue to rise. And that's a real concern, because the longer someone is unemployed, typically the more difficult it is to return to the economy and return to the labor force. I won't go too much into this. This is kind of a messy chart, but it's the major industry categories in Spokane MSA at the base of January 2020 as the employment. And then I've done the percent change over the next year and 3 months. So you can just see how varied this economy has been on the various industries over the past year. And it just shows how uneven the current recovery is and how some industries are continuing to be significantly down year over year. But healthcare and social assistance, transportation, warehousing, utilities, and professional and business services have actually all increased in employment over this time, while the overall number of employed has decreased in that same time. So most interestingly, I think, as I'm talking of a severe amount of labor out of the market currently, we actually have a massive amount of new online job postings occurring. In Spokane County, we had over 8,000 new job postings, which is just a record number for 1 month. And it's a significant amount of pent-up demand in the economy currently. And just that at the same time as having people exited from the labor force is causing, I'm sure a lot of employers are experiencing right now, of a real difficult time finding employees to fill the roles. So just this last 2 years of job postings, it's a huge spike. We'll see if it continues in April. I anticipate it probably will. And then just by industry, what industries are posting the most, and then by occupation. I'll have this slide deck sent out to everyone with the meeting recording. But yeah, the current labor shortages are being felt. A lot of articles about it locally. A lot of restaurants are having to pay signing bonuses and such to try and incentivize people to come back. And then lastly, I'll talk about talent solutions later as part of the chat. But that's all I wanted to share, just to kind of lead off where things stand right now in terms of the economy.
That's great. Thank you, Mike. And if you have any questions or comments that pop into your head, feel free to drop them in the chat and we will revisit those after our speakers. Up next, we'll hear from Wade Larson.
All right. Hey, thanks. Thanks. You know, one thing for sure is, you know, we started talking about this whole concept of new normal. It's not new anymore. This is just normal. And we hear about this whole, when are we going to go back to normal? And it's not going to be normal because these trends that we've created, this is how it's going to be. We're not going to have this flood of coming back to the workplace. Everybody shifted and learned how to go back, you know, to work from home. And to be honest, we figured it out. What we realized is that it's a lot more economical for us to have people to work from home. And we've learned how to shift. We've learned how to manage around people's schedules and their spouses' schedules and the kids' schedules and the dog's schedules, right? Taking the people to bed. I mean, we've had to get a lot more flexible. But here's what we've learned about the workforce too. I concur. So I appreciate the tee up from this report, because here are the trends that we see. There's definitely an increase in anxiety among the employees because this has not been an easy year. I mean, if you think about this, we had a lot going on, and whether or not it happened in our house, who knew that a year ago we would have things such as social justice taking the front, you know, the front page of in the workplace. And everybody's talking about it, right? Who wasn't waiting at 1:30 our time last night or yesterday afternoon to see what was going to play out as to whether or not things were going to just go to heck across the country. I mean, that's real. Bring it back to the workplace, because that's what people are talking about. That's what people are here looking at, and that affects our workplace. But things like digital transformation, things such as integrating long-term, how do we teach people to work from home? Integrating these other new normalcies. This is what normal is. So when we say, when are we going to go back to normal? We're here. This is it. There is no, and if we were to go back to normal because we can all take off the masks, by the time we get there, that's going to be 2 to 3 years ago. And who wants to go back to 2 to 3 years ago with anything? But here's what else we have when it comes to labor that's available to us as employers. This is what we recognize. Number one, we've had a decrease in the number of people that were going to get educated in the areas that we really needed, especially in the trades. There was a massive decrease in people going to the trades, welding, machining, auto tech, these things, the plumbers. You try to find a plumber in the Spokane area, it's tough. People are not getting this anyway. There's a decrease before, and now with this past year, I mean, we're going to feel the ripple effects of this for years to come, because they're not going, they weren't going before, and they're not going now. And so we have a challenge there. Number two, we have, we have the competition with the lower wages, because to be honest, people are now, with the unemployment incentives for the past year, people make more not being employed than being employed. And that's a challenge. To the point that was made of how many people stepped out of the workforce. We have anybody who is near retirement stepped out. Working moms stepped out. Anybody who's frustrated stepped out. At one point, we had almost 700,000 people who at one point stepped out of the workforce nationally. That's a chunk of people that we don't have anymore. So anyway, that's going on in terms of the supply of labor. In terms of demand for labor, we were hurting before the pandemic for specialized labor. Now we have, with all these people leaving, the retirees left, we have, as he said, an increase in women leaving, we have an increase in all these other people who aren't available. The increase just continues to grow. But with that, we also have the decrease of the general labor force that's gone, because they're staying at home. They're making more working at home, or just staying at home. But we also have the decrease of general labor that was available because we closed the borders for 4 years. And that's not going to ease up anytime soon, just overnight. We're having some challenges there. These are some shifts in terms of supply and demand, and they're not going to get any easier right away. But let me tell you what we're doing as employers. And this is critical to understand, both from the employee side, or from the employee side, from the employer side, and also from the education side. We've seen a massive shift from the employer side to work in terms of competencies. In the past, we'd say, all right, how many employees do we need? How many full people do we need? How many bodies do we need? And of course, that gets complicated when all of a sudden we have too many people. So what do? Let's lay them off. Well, we end up laying off Bob. Well, Bob has certain skill sets that we need, but we only need him 20% of the time. And if we lay off Bob, we don't have Bob anymore. We're starting to look in terms of competencies. That means, what do I need? When do I need it? And for how long do I need those competencies? And we start looking at that in terms of bodies of knowledge, bodies of skill. And we're starting to get scrappy with this. This past year has meant we had to get scrappy because we can't find that labor. And so we in human resources, we're becoming brokers of labor, not brokers in terms of how many bodies and how many people. We're starting to look into, we're competency brokers, because when they come to us, they say, look, I need this skill set for this amount of time in this capacity. And we start looking and saying, who do we have internally? Who do we have externally? And so to this point, you go back 2 to 3 years and we say gig worker. What's a gig? And nowadays, gig worker, yeah, we understand it. In fact, we're starting to look and say, could we hire a gig worker for this task? Some companies are built entirely on gig labor. They'll go to a place like Fiverr or guru.com, and they will go piece together 50% of their efforts just by hiring off of fiverr.com. That's how today's economy works. But to be honest, that's how we do things. We say, what do you need done? What's the task that you need done, for how long and in how many pieces? And we go piece that together. Sometimes it isn't a full-time person, but that full-time person may come on board in a specific job, but they may also be on board saying, yeah, I'm going to need you, but we're going to break you into 2 parts or into 3 parts. And they may be working simultaneously in various compartments. That's the kind of person that we're looking for. And that's the kind of person that we're going to be skilling up in the future. That's the kind of worker that we're going to be working with from now on. So in terms of the market, that's how the market's going to be working. And the type of employee that's coming into the workplace, we're going to have to think differently. So the types of skills that the new employee has to get skilled up on, that's coming out of school, it's not just bodies of knowledge, but they have to have competencies, not just one line. They have to be skilled in bodies of knowledge that are interchangeable, not just a single career either. They have to be able to move these competencies around. They need to be flexible. They need to gain these competencies in resiliency. They have to be able to be high performers, because if they can't be high performers, they won't be able to compete. They need to understand technology, and they need to understand, these personal skills. So the question comes up, what is a gig worker? A gig is where somebody comes in, they pay me X number of dollars to do one thing. So for example, on the side, I'll write resumes, right? I'll write resumes for somebody to help them out. So a resume, this is a gig worker where somebody pays me X number of dollars and I help them write a resume. That's a gig. You give me X number of dollars, I help you write a new resume. That's the transaction. That's a gig. Other people will, my son is a graphic designer. They need help to create a logo. They pay him X number of dollars. He creates their logo. Transaction is done. It's not a full-time employment. They go in, here's the job. Transaction is done. That's a gig. That's a competency. You go in, I need a job done. That's it. That's how things work. So in terms of the future, that's how the future is going to be working. That's how the future is. And so globally, understand that because we can't find these things locally, we in human resources and we as companies, we're starting to source labor differently. If we can't find it locally, we're going to source it nationally and we're going to source it globally. And I'm not talking about sourcing it out. And when we say, oh, we're going to outsource it to India, well, to be honest, some of these tasks we might. We have some genius people who are in India who have master's degrees and PhDs who, you know what, if we have a body of knowledge, we may need to source out a specific project in a gig and say, let's go do this. It doesn't mean that we're going to get rid of anybody. It doesn't mean we're going to lay anybody off. It just means we may need this task. But today's worker, definitely tomorrow's worker, needs to be resilient, needs to be flexible, and we need to be skilled. So what do we need? In terms of the trades, yeah, a welder still has to weld. But when they come to work for us, I don't need them to work in one job for 20 years. I need them to be able to work in this capacity, but also understand that the rules are going to change because they may be working for a federal contract today, and they may be working for a bread and butter kind of a contract tomorrow. But they may need to upskill to go to Department of Energy jobs in the next week. And so they're going to have to go through some rigorous training, but they're going to need to use their skills in multiple ways. And we're going to need to upskill them internally. Looking down the road for 5 years, that's part of our upskilling is to say, what do I need today? What do I need tomorrow? And what do I need next week in terms of down the road for 5 years? I need to say, what does the market have? And sometimes I have to say, this is where I've been working with the K-12 groups and with the colleges and universities to say, what can we do to help support everybody going into the programs? Because long-term, I need to make sure that we have enough engineers and enough welders and machinists. Let's feed that flow. But sometimes, even internally, do I have enough people to do the job? And as employers, we have had to become very proactive with a term called upskilling. If you're not familiar with that word as an employer, you need to become very familiar with that word, upskilling. That is the word of the day. And that's basically taking all your people where they're at and continuously teaching them, helping them to grow, and continuously improving them. So anyway, those are some of the principles. So those are some of the concepts that we're working with today. And that's where we're at. So from our end, we in Human Resources have gone through a couple of phases in the past, shifting from just doing paperwork, moving into business partnerships. But today we're moving into HR 3.0, which is truly taking a leadership position and understanding what the market is, what your business is, and aligning your people to meet those needs. So that's what we're working on today. So thanks.
Great. Thank you for sharing, Wade. Now up, Mark Baldwin from EWU.
Great. Thanks, Wade. I am glad to hear you talk about those things. I think the university in a way is actually dealing with the same sort of thing. So just to kind of give you a sense of where Eastern is right now, we're preparing to have what we would call a normal, and I do understand that word doesn't actually really have any meaning anymore, but we are going to open classes up in the classrooms in the fall. We are expecting our students to be here living in the residence halls and doing the things that college students do. And as we prepare for fall and in the context of this conversation, we wanted to talk a little bit today about kind of what the university is facing and what we're seeing. So we have limited resources. We can't, especially a regional university, isn't really in a good position to offer a full array of academic degrees across the spectrum. So we're needing to understand where the demand is going to be in the labor market, where students' interests are going to be, and to try to start to match some of those things together. So we've done an internal study that will be released in May to our board of trustees that really identifies areas that we know in the state of Washington have higher demand than the number of degrees that are produced. And there's a few of them that are, you would probably not be surprised, but computer science is the number one. But with the volume, the scope of that gap between degree earners in that field, computer science, and all the things that are associated with that, and the number of jobs that are open is huge. It's like 50,000 positions annually that are unmet, unfilled. And so if you're a university with limited resources, you need to aim at those kinds of targets. So for Eastern, we're looking at cybersecurity as being a primary growth area for us. An article, an op-ed came out in the Seattle Times recently describing the threat of cybersecurity and the breaches that have happened. And how Eastern's trying to respond to that. And I know that a lot of people in the region, a lot of schools in the region are also doing that. We're really focused on infrastructure protection and more than on the user side, but and we're getting accredited in that area, and we'll be one of a very few schools that have that level of accreditation. And I'm bragging a little bit, but I'm really trying to show that a university doesn't usually pivot very quickly, but Eastern is trying to gear up to pivot into these kinds of needs. We know business and marketing. The state of Washington imports a lot of degree holders into the state, and business and marketing is another area where that happens. Elementary education is a huge need and a gap that Eastern is working on trying to address, as obviously particularly the regional schools are doing that. And the health professions, and it's not a surprise that we're paying a lot more attention to the whole health sector these days. But EWU, which has had a lot of good health programs, especially at the graduate level, we're now trying to think about, well, where are the community's needs at, and how can we respond to those? So for us, the trick is we start, especially at the undergraduate level, we start grabbing students at 16-year-olds, right? And the bachelor's degree value isn't as obvious as it once was. So what we're trying to do is help students project 5 years from now, what kind of things will you want to do? What kind of job openings are available for you? And we're doing it with a degree that people are wondering what's the value of it. So this is a really hard sell, right? And so we're basically saying, we promise that by the time you get to the finish line, you're going to have a degree that that will get you into the workforce in an area that you want to be at. So what we're struggling with that, because we kind of know where we are now, when we don't always know where we're going to need to be. And so what we're doing, and this sounds really familiar to what Wade was kind of talking about where employees need to be, is we're really focusing now on skills and the habits of mind that make an employee or a person flexible enough to go after the areas that they're interested in, or where the job market has capacity for them. And that's sort of a different frame of mind. A university generally operates from an academic perspective and says, we're here about learning, and teaching and learning is our primary mission. We understand that. But we usually kind of leave it at that. And we don't think that that's going to be something that attracts the number of students to our school that we need to have. And so what we're really talking about now is getting students to start thinking about their mission and not their major. And that is a real paradigm shift, but it's a kind of shift that I think a regional school can really embrace. And so the idea there is to really look at who am I as a person? A student needs to think about this. Who am I? What am I passionate about? And where do I want to go? And then we work with them and say, well, these are the kinds of things that we offer that can help you develop, those passions that you have. Is it going to lead to a major? Yeah, we'll get there. And is it going to lead to a degree? Of course. But the point is to cultivate the students and the skills and the things that they want to do. What students are telling us is that they can't wait 4 years to get engaged in their communities and doing the things they want to do. So Eastern's going to begin introducing changes in its curriculum to really engage students in real world problems and in the community itself, partnering with the community to help, bring our resources to bear in, data mining and, oh my goodness, everything, political science and music and everything. And so as my giant long run-on sentence here keeps going. So this experiential learning, we call it, we're really trying to understand it and help our faculty cultivate it. But, with that in mind, where we're really trying to go with that is engaging students early on in real world problems and giving them a set of skills and confidence so that they can go out of the workforce and say, we have done this already. We know what we're doing. We're applying what we're learning. So universities across the nation have been talking for a long time about interdisciplinary learning. And that's great. Interdisciplinary learning generally mixes disciplines together and creates sort of a new approach. So there's a problem. You combine all these things, psychology and history and business and so on, into kind of a new discipline, a new approach. What Eastern's trying to do is not get away from the disciplines, but to focus all the disciplines that can come to bear on a problem, staying within their own field, and then giving people experiences working in those fields. And that's really important because what we're learning is that these complex problems that we're facing, they need a wide array of expertise and disciplinary expertise to really come to holistic solutions. So Eastern's going to be really refocusing its efforts in its degree array to really address the more practical and concrete needs of our region, but also to try to do it in a way that excites students about what they're learning and engaging them in their problems, in the problem solving that our communities need. And then one last thing I wanted to add is the solutions that we're looking at are more than just one institution. It's all institutions coming together and working in a coordinated way to make things happen for students. And so, for example, Spokane Community College has done a really important thing with journeyman license and awarding credit within some of their degrees to help students get 2-year degrees. And that's really fantastic. And it really is a big deal. People should really recognize the value of that. And Eastern has tried to partner with them and has partnered with them to take those degrees and match them to bachelor's degrees in applied technology, for example. And so the reason I bring that up is because we need to think about these in long-term, many-year kind of windows. And a lot of our first reactions to the problem don't create the kinds of solutions that give students, a lot of flexibility and ways to grow and continue forward. So, so this morning, I wanted to mention, these kinds of things: the look at the state and the gaps in degree production, how a regional school can kind of respond to that, what kind of learning we're looking at doing to try to help our students engage right away in their communities and doing real life, real world problem solving in a multidisciplinary setting, and then also talk about how we can all work together and build sort of a stair-step approach to developing students and helping them keep their options open as they go forward, or future proofing their degree, I guess you would say. So yeah, thank you for giving me the chance to speak.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate that. And then Cheney School District, Adam Smith, like to hear from you.
Unmuted. All right. Well, it's been kind of fun listening to everybody talk. And I think the big reason why it's fun is because I've been listening to Mike talk for the last 3 years about what's going on in the workforce. And I've been trying to adapt that to what we're doing out at Cheney. And so hopefully you're going to be able to see that. So my name's Adam Smith. I've been doing a CT director job out here for just over 2.5 years, working with the school district and trying to match what we're doing inside of the classroom at the high school level with what is needed in the industry around us, so that our students have this pathway forward as they leave high school, whether it to be go straight to work or to go into a college like Eastern or the community college system. So I guess as I was listening to everybody talk, I think for me, it's kind of important. I've been teaching at Cheney High School since 1998. And I was West Plains Little League president for 10 years out here. So I have a real passion for the West Plains and seeing the growth out here. My first house that I bought was out there by the Petro station before they even had anything out there, before Petro was even there. All the roads were dead ends. And I built a house, and then all of a sudden, like the whole world built up around me. It was kind of fun to watch all that happen. So having opportunities for our students to move forward is a passion of mine. And it's something that I'm going to hopefully be able to do for until I get done doing this job. And so I want to make sure that I listen to the industry around our community to make sure that our students have the same opportunities when they leave here, leave the high school system, to go pursue what their passions are. So let's see here. Yeah, I think the rest of this stuff's just going to kind of come out. So in the chat, I created a document that kind of just shows what we're working on out here at the high school as part of being, presenting these solutions. And I'm also going to screen share this in case you cannot see or open up the document yet. But these are our current courses that we're offering at Cheney High School, with all of the different areas where they're being offered at. And the whole idea is that my passion is to try to let students take classes in their passion and follow their pathways forward. And so the only way you can do that is to expand offerings and get them those opportunities. So hopefully all of the job opportunities and all of the areas of growth that we talked about, hopefully you're able to see those inside of our course offerings that we're trying to give those students those options to get there. And so I'm just kind of scrolling through this kind of quickly, and I'll let you kind of read through it, and that's why I wanted to share it. But this is the area where I've been really taking a lot of focus as the CT director with all of our teachers, is in this programs of study area, where we're trying to build out, not just take one class in an area and, okay, now you know what that is, now, move on to the next thing, but actually build out these areas where students can take a series of classes that grow their skills inside of those areas. So that they're ready to move into our local industries, and listening to what Mike has to say about what certifications are needed or what skill sets the industries are looking for allows me to try and build these program areas out. So hopefully you can kind of see, students can take 3 years of study in computer science right now. They can do 4 years in network fundamentals, which is a cybersecurity. And I work very closely with Stu Steiner at Eastern, and Brady Nielsen at Spokane Falls, and Laura Career at Spokane Community College, to make sure that our students are ready to move into those occupations. All the way across to our health sciences with biomedical coming on board, and listening to the need for, like in business and marketing, You can see students can take 2 years of accounting. They can do 4 years of study in finance and entrepreneurship and management. We got all kinds of courses on there. And so being able to hear those needs, what you're talking about, and then also about some of these areas that we're really starting to work on. In the last year, we've started a careers in education program to get students started on learning how to be educators earlier. Core Plus manufacturing, working with Boeing to bring in Core Plus into there, and then carpentry so that they can start to learn those hands-on skills and work on those programs. So those are coming. They aren't fully there, but we are working on building that out more. And then 2 years ago, just understanding the need for students to leave with certifications so that they can, I know certification isn't proof that you can do the job, but it sure does start a good conversation. And I will tell you, just as employers out there, that we have a hard time talking to students about the chicken egg, okay? How do you get experience when there's no one that will give you experience? And so I will say that you can help this by helping opportunities for students, because I got kids earning their CCNA in high school, and then they can't figure out a way to get into a networking or a cybersecurity job because everybody's like, oh, you're a high schooler, but they got an industry level certification and they have a tremendous skill set. So, so we can definitely use help in trying to bridge those gaps to help them get the experience so that they can apply for those jobs that are dependent on experience and how to do that. So you can see the certifications that students get these fully paid for and free through the school district right now, depending on how many years of study they do inside of certain areas. And those are out there for them to help them move forward. And we are looking to add more. We have multiple projects that are moving along, headed towards being able to get more certifications in there. And that's been one of the goals of our teachers. We've done a lot of curriculum adjustment. When I took over, I've been teaching computer science and networking. So I've been playing in this certification field for 20 years, since early 2000. That's what it was all about. And so I'm trying to help all of the rest of our departments kind of move into those areas. And then I thought it was, as part of a solution, important for you to be able to see just what steps were taken with our students at Cheney to make sure that they are ready to move into those next steps of their career, whether it be in a college or into the career. So we start off, we've purchased a program called School Links that is a high school beyond plan piece of software that will help the students figure out their passions, figure out what careers they match up to, and give them some options inside of that. And then it helps them plan their course planning over for their high school career to make sure that they can find these programs of study. You know, if I want, you know, I think probably one of the saddest stories I heard was that I had a kid who I needed some help in my classroom, and he had literally been sitting outside of a teacher's door for the whole school year. And so when I mentioned this to a teacher, they're like, well, this kid's sitting outside my door, grab him and he'll help you. So I talked to him, and he ends up wanting to be going into cybersecurity in the Air Force. And I'm like, I've never met you before. I've been teaching all of these classes, and it's matched up exactly with what you want to do. This was 10 years ago, and we're trying to fix that problem. We're trying to get them identified earlier, get their skills and their passions identified earlier, and get them involved in these programs earlier so they can build this forward so they're ready for those next steps to solve some of the problems. So right now we're starting career exploration in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade so that they can make plans for their high school. They continue to revise and look at that all the way through high school. As they do, they either choose courses where they're exploring or choose courses that this is what I want to do. So now I can follow it by taking this pathway. Then you study inside of it, and hopefully we're going to get everything lined up to either you're going in to earn your certifications, or we're really trying to expand our worksite learning program. We actually stole a great West Plains member, Dory Bird, who is now running our worksite learning program. And she's, you know, COVID and everything kind of set us back a little bit off of what we're going to do with that. But we're planning and hoping that this becomes a work experience kind of thing where all of our students are working towards here, but also getting out there in the workforce. And we have a great community member who can help us help them find jobs, and who you can work with to help get those students moved into those next opportunities. And then they're graduated and they're ready for that post-secondary education and or careers, whatever their path is going to take. They're kind of set up and working that way. So as far as the solutions of, this is how I'm kind of trying to direct our department and direct our teachers to work forward off of this. I am in constant contact with Mike. Every month we have meetings and I'm listening to what he has to say. Core Plus manufacturing was not on my radar a year ago, and we're offering our first classes right now this year. We've also landed a big grant that we're going to be putting money into that program and building that out. So that's what we're trying to do. And I definitely don't want to fly blind off of all of this. So I wanted to take this opportunity to encourage you, if you have feedback or needs or certifications, or see, hey, I can see myself being a part of this or my industry, please contact me. Let me know. I want to listen. I need advisory members. Our teachers need advisory members so that we can help meet this need, because I've been here for 25 years. I'm not going anywhere for the next 20 years. And I want to make this pathway available not only for my kids, but for all of our kids out here on the West Plains. So yeah, I'm open for feedback off of if you see a place where we can expand for programs of study, where certifications we can offer, or how we can just, advise us as a program advisor. And, it's kind of sad. We talk about the real world inside of education, and it really is the real world out there. We don't have enough contacts moving outside and hearing what's going on in industry. CTE has a job and a charge to do that, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we're great at it or we know how to get into it. So if you want to be a part of what we're doing, please let me know and I can help make you a part of what we're doing.
That's great. Thank you for sharing, Adam. And finally, we're going to hear from Medical Lake School District. Please join me in welcoming Tim Ames and Kim Headrick. Tim, I think you're muted.
Kim does that to me all the time. She mutes me. So, but anyway, I want to thank Adam for, every public school is doing exactly what Cheney is. So we don't have to report today, but no. So at Medical Lake, we're a smaller high school. We have 500 students versus what Cheney has. So we, I think Mike McBride might have been a part of it. We did a workforce analysis of our high school CTE program. And, good job, Kim. And so when Mike started talking and Wade started talking, I started looking at, things that, are we still in line after the COVID? And let me talk what COVID did to high school. Wade mentioned it's the new normal is the new normal. What kids told us in high school is that when we opened up again, about 100 of our high school kids liked the self-paced online Connect program plus because they started working. They liked the flexibility on how we could meet their needs. And so as we move into next year, you're not going to see a 6-period traditional schedule from Medical Lake High School. You'll begin to see some block time. So our CTE teachers really enjoyed the block time, 90-minute blocks where they could dig deeper into skills for kids. And so Mark Mackey and I had talked for years and finally got Mike McBride, were you a part of this? Okay, yeah, because I think I talked to Mike too, but we won't go in great detail, but if Kim could flick a couple of pages that we took our CTE courses, and ag science is a big deal in Medical Lake. As you know, we have a lot of agriculture around us. We still have a lot of kids that are engaged and live on wheat farms. And so we thought it's a robust program for us. We get a lot of kids in it. But what I enjoyed the most out of this report is that jobs require a high school degree or less, jobs that require an associate's degree, and jobs that require a bachelor's degree and above went through our 7 courses that we did. So what we were tasked with is, if we're going to teach a CTE course in the Medical Lake School District, does it have a viable career after it. So, and if we weren't doing that, those are the ones we began to eliminate as CTE, or for example, shop turned into a manufacturing framework versus the old time shop that we had. So as you look at this, this really helped us. Ann Everett, our outstanding CTE director, couldn't join us today. But so we walked through this, and some of the things I looked like, okay, what are baseline skills that Wade explained that kids need? And are we on track to create that flexible gig type of worker? And I feel pretty confident where we're at right now. As you look at, we have our career and technical graduation pathways that kids can now look at. What do I take as a freshman, sophomore, junior, senior? If I'm in ag, what are the courses that we offer as far as that, and so that's kind of where we started, and we did revisions to it. And we just added, for example, I know Adam talked about this. We also are adding an educational piece to it, given the fact that there's, it's a very viable career. And so we moved through that. And as a result of this analysis, we made some changes to the way we were doing things. Kim's going to touch base more on where we start, how it starts in middle school, and how it moves to high school. So, and you can see we also have certification pathways. We have a lot of dual credit. So most of our courses, kids can get college credit as well as certification coming out of each courses. So Kim, you want to add?
Yeah, I'll just add that based on basically that workforce development report that we received last January, so right before COVID, we did an analysis of our current programming based on what our needs are around our community, and identified our pathways. And for our students, again, as Tim mentioned, we're small, so our pathways encompass both what would be considered traditional CTE courses as well as core courses. And really provide an opportunity for students to have that broad look, both the technical skills in terms of the book learning, those kinds of things that are needed, as well as those hands-on practical skills. And so that's really what we tend to look at. So we have students, who are in each of these pathways that may be going straight into the workforce, but also may be going to a four-year university and with greater post-secondary doctor, master's degree programs within that. And so we really work to blend all of those together. As Tim mentioned, one of our biggest strengths, and Adam, you led into it as well, is really how do we encompass that information into our middle school programs, so that as they're coming out, you can see at the top, really those career clusters. So these are kind of the areas that we want our middle school kids to start taking a look at, to understand and begin to develop some understanding of what they are interested in, so that when they enter into high school, they can begin to look into the pathway. Again, we are absolutely folks, wanting kids to have a broad spectrum in terms of opportunity, but really begin that thinking process. To that end, as across the state, our high school and beyond plans begin in the middle school. And we really have worked to streamline so that what is started in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade is really carried forward with intentional conversations, really clear discussion around what these pathways are and what those career opportunities are encompassed within those. And so that then they're coming into high school, building that first year schedule with some knowledge and background that they can then begin to explore some of those career paths that they're interested in.
Thank you for sharing, Tim and Kim. We are going to go to Q&A. So if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat. There was one from Lee, and maybe we can just kind of have that conversation. It was answered a little bit in the chat, but might be good for folks to hear. And they asked, taking into account that we need employees with many competencies, what advice would be given to a student that wanted their business marketing degree to pair with a psychology interest? Is there workforce information to direct incoming college students to make these choices?
So I can talk for Eastern on that. We do sit down with students. We have what's called area of interest. When students apply, they come in and we identify things that they on their application that they want to do. And what we've learned is that a lot of times it's mom's vision of what the student wants to do and not really the student's vision of what the student wants to do. And so our intake is usually spent really trying to help the student think about what they enjoy doing, what kind of things have they studied, what excites them. And then we have within our information system the ability to start to show students, what kind of careers are associated with those kinds of skill sets. The other conversation that's happening at universities, and I touched on this a little bit, is you almost can't as a student get ahead of the curve on preparing for careers. And so we talk about having transferable skills and the kinds of foundation and learning that allows you to approach, new enterprises with the ability to learn them, and some of them are very typical. They're things that we could probably whiteboard out. Can you work in a team? Can you communicate? Can you think critically? Are you, as a student and then as an employee, are you able to take on new tasks? Are you fearful of change? Those kinds of things. And so we're trying to build those into our curriculum so that really, no matter where the student heads in terms of a major, they have the kinds of skills that they can then go out into the workforce and be successful. And one last thing, just to add on really quick. One of the things that we think are keeping students out of our educational pathways is a sense that they're being hemmed into a certain track or a certain outcome, and probably rightly saying it's maybe a little too early for me to know exactly what I want to do. And so one of the things that I think is important is for us to continue these kinds of conversations and say, this is the foundation in the high school, and these are the things that the students are doing and they're loving. What's that next step for the student? And there could be multiple steps, multiple launch points. And where there appears to be a dead end, let's address that and say, well, then what can we do about that? And let's remove that barrier so that people are feeling like they haven't locked themselves into a forever trajectory, and that they can switch and change and oh man, what was the word, Wade, that you used? Upskill. Yep. Yeah. And that's a great word. So, that's another element of this, is to try to help students understand you don't have to come in and say, I'm doing psychology, and be afraid that you will be doing psychology when you're 60 years old, that you can change paths.
I'll just add real quickly, not necessarily to directly answer your question, Lee, but I saw Jason Miller's on the call, and that brings to mind one of my favorite projects that we work on at Spokane Workforce Council with KSPS, is the Career Explore Northwest website and tool that we're building out, that allows specifically young people to click certain types of skill sets or certain types of things that they enjoy, and determine what type of local jobs align with that. And then you get wage information, specifically how many job postings there are generally about that, and then also what type of education it gives. So it's an easy way to kind of explore the different options, and it's very, very localized is what makes it so good. And there's a lot of local employers, I believe Wagstaff's one of them, who's sponsored specific videos to give an idea of what the job looks like locally, and it's just a wonderful tool that I love helping to build out. And so that's what I'd send to any young person who's looking to explore local employment.
Thank you, Kim, for posting that in the chat. The link is there for that website. And thank you, Jason, for heading that project for the last few years. Next question, Melanie Rose. With all of the economic growth in the West Plains, how is our education system K-20 tied into and aligned with the job skills needed to fill these positions? It seems like there might be gaps. How can these gaps be addressed?
I'll go just to answer a little bit what we're trying to do. I'm on GSI's council. I work with Mike McBride every month, listening to him and taking their stuff back, as well as obviously as a CTE director for the school district. That's kind of my job, to try and do as much as I can. I would agree with you, Melanie, that is a huge gap, and trying to keep up with what's going on is really, really hard. We're working on it, but once again, I don't want to kick stuff back to industry and say, hey, you need to help us out on this. But like for me personally, and one of my major goals is to be part of West Plains Chamber of Commerce. And so hopefully I'm going to be able to, I took over 2 years ago, and it's been just a whirlwind to try and get everything caught up in those things. But I do want to be more of a member and more listening to what's going on for the K-12. I'm on 3 committees that work with colleges. And so trying to listen to what the colleges are hearing and be able to bring that down to where I can do that. So there are gaps. I think it would be hard to not admit, or it wouldn't be hard to admit that, but we are working to try and do that. And I think having more conversations like this helps bridge those gaps and more communication. I think I was listening to somebody, they said there's like 70 different aerospace manufacturing businesses in the Spokane area. They're small. No one really knows they're existing, but they're there. And as I'm trying to start a manufacturing program, I don't know who those people are. And so it's a lot of work to go try and find out who those people are and still maintain all of the other stuff that we're working on. So I agree with you, and we'll hopefully be able to keep communicating and help that out. But I do think positions like mine are going to be instrumental in helping bridge that gap between there, that there are some linchpin people that if you can keep them informed of what's going on, they can really help spread the word and guide the direction to meet those needs.
And Adam, to that point, that you made, I mean, what I've noticed, especially over the last, 3 years, as I've engaged with, with folks at the colleges, universities, and in the K-12 sector too, from the employer's perspective, we have, I'm not sure what happened, but we really haven't been talking. We have not been talking to the school side. And so we've done the blame game, right? We've complained a lot about what's coming out of the school system, right? And we complain about it and say, hey, they're arriving here, we don't have the skill sets. We joke about, hey, now they've arrived to the workplace, and now with the training begins, and so we can blame and joke all we want, but I don't see a ton of employers who are there at the table with us engaging at the at the school site either. No, there are a handful, and a number of them are here represented too today. So I'm not saying nobody. I mean, there are several who are out there as community partners, and they're doing a great job. But really collectively, we need to do a better job as employers of engaging the community partners, especially the educational partners, to say, look, here's some feedback. Here's what we need, and here's some. Anyway, we need to bridge the gap. We need to come together. We need to find a way to bridge it and get the communication out there, because the world is a change, and I mean it has been changing rapidly, but the rate of that changes is so fast. I mean, even the last 12 months, I mean, you guys have been doing all you can just to manage that change. And for you guys, it's been every 5 minutes. And for us too, I mean, we're trying to figure out what to do with our employees every 5 minutes. But at the same time, the employees, the individuals, are trying to figure out what to do every 5 minutes. And here we are, we're emerging from this thing, and we've got new skill sets that we've got to figure this thing out. And so what your folks are coming out of, whether it's out of high school going into the workforce, out of community college coming out of the workforce, or out of the 4 years coming into the workforce, the skill sets that they're coming into now are completely different than their expectations than when they went in. And they are not prepared. We're not prepared to get them, and we need to be better at communicating at this. So anyway, I guess that's our collective invitation to say, hey, employers, we need to reach out to you, and for education to say, hey, feel free to come knock on our door and ask, and we got to figure out a way to do this. So
I'm gonna agree with that, Wade, in terms of, and I appreciate that, because I think a lot of it is that in in education, we've kind of been in a cycle for a number of years. And really that whole concept of really being able to think beyond what we've known in the past into really trying to innovate into the future is difficult, you know, for some folks who have been in education maybe for a number of years or even for a few. But, you know, so that's that difficult piece of like, we don't, in some regards, we have folks who have no concept of what it really means for in terms of for kids as they're exiting our systems in this different world. You know, for a lot of folks, they think of education still as what they experienced versus to move forward. And so that conversation can help us as we try, you know, as we move forward and encourage innovation and thinking outside of the box and all of those pieces. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah. If it's older than 3 to 5 years that you've experienced it, it is a complete, I mean, it's completely different. And so, no, we need to engage. We need to engage.
And just to add, I think, you know, the idea of, you know, communication, clearly, you know, there's no downside to that. But I think that, you know, what we're trying to do is get some, you know, like we have a President's Regional Advisory Council. Some of you are on that. It's going to meet in 2 or 3 weeks. And I think you know, the theme there is going to be, you know, let's make this a real working committee that really informs the university and how the university can apply its resources to help, you know, really start to meet needs and address needs in our region. And the other part of that is to not be passive about it, but to get students out there and really say, you know, the classroom is great, or the virtual learning environment, you know, it has it serves a purpose, but it's not enough anymore. And we really need to get our students out there on the streets, getting their hands dirty, so to speak, and really engaging in the community, in the work that they're going to be doing after they graduate. But here's the problem. The participation in internships and those kinds of active learning is very skewed towards students who have good financial background and support. And so what we really need right now is to start thinking about how can we come together as a community and support these students, and when they're out there getting the experience that they need to be productive employees when they graduate. And that is a barrier. That's something we're working on, but the solutions seem pretty few and far between right now.
And I just wanted to add one last point to this. Is all really good and valid in terms of employer engagement directly with schools. I attend many advisory board meetings and such with the community colleges and see employers and see directly how they can speak to programs and stuff. But when it comes to the current labor market, after the past recession, we had a bit of a credential inflation because there's so many people on the market that you could ask for a bachelor's degree to fill any role, basically. And now it's the exact opposite. We're out of a recession, starting to have economic growth, and we're in a labor shortage. So we really try to, the primary way beyond direct engagement with employers with education to learn what skills and credentials employers need is job postings. I look at job postings data constantly, and if an employer can get really tuned in on exactly what they're after in terms of skills, credentials, and knowing that a potential credential might be more applicable for a specific role than just a blanket degree, that helps immensely for the workforce development system to understand how we can put our dollars towards training people for these specific job skills and specific credentials. So I'll just add that as well, that just putting out blanket BA degree, it works in some cases, but it's definitely not the case on a lot of technical jobs.
All right, thank you. And out of respect for everyone's time, it looks like Wade did answer Lee's last question in the chat. And just a shout out, the West Plains is looking to establish a workforce committee. So if you're interested, email Deanna at westplainschamber.org, and I think she can put her email there in the chat. And Mitch Swenson, who's a school board member at Cheney and a booster club member at Cheney High School, wanted me to do a shout out for their annual golf scramble at Fairways Golf Course on May 23rd. And you can find that on the Fairways Facebook page. Thank you again to our speakers for joining us today. It was really great hearing from your experiences and the programs you've developed and the things that you're looking for. It's really, really important to have this conversation. And it's really nice to see so many great people working together to support workforce development and meet the needs, specifically for the West Plains. Please follow us on our website and Facebook page and look for updates in your inbox. And we'll send out this recorded video probably by tomorrow. So thank you for joining us today and hope you have a great Wednesday.